Well, it's been 3 years and we finally have it. The second chapter to Toby Fox's Undertale follow-up, Deltarune. You know, I guess it hasn't been that long of a wait despite what the internet says. I mean, that is a very average amount of time to get a follow-up to a game. But then again, it's a chapter and not a sequel, so you can see why the fan base was so restless for the next part of the story. But I would say that the wait was well worth it. Plus, we have to give Toby Fox a break. The guy had wrist problems, and then there was 2020. And well, the game's delay was basically inevitable after that shitstorm year. So when we last left our heroes, Chris, Susie, and Rousey had just saved the Dark World from the tyranny of the king, after his son Lancer made the save. Susie made a face turn from being a school bully to now being friends with Chris, but as Chapter 1 came to a close, we saw quite the disturbing imagery from our old Chrissy boy. When Chapter 2 begins, we're led to believe that Chris has pulled the knife on Torelli, but we're swerved into the fact that the knife Torelli is referring to is just what's been left as evidence of Chris eating the entire pie she baked. This kind of seems like a cop-out, but if you keep playing, you'll appreciate the fact that the narrative doesn't decide to give Chris the full-on heel turn we all thought we were getting. At least not now anyway. So Chris and Susie meet back up at school and as planned decide to return to the Dark World to visit Rousey and are treated to new rooms, and you can see how much a relationship between you and Rousey has blossomed. And even Susie, though still Susie of course, has even smoothed out her rough edges a bit when it comes to her interactions with Rousey. Well, sort of. But the great part of this revisit is how the town that was last seen barren is now full of all the king's men that are now free and living happily. Something about that continuity just felt so right, seeing the fruits of your labor. But soon, Chris and Susie disembark for the computer lab at the library to work on their school project. But when you know it, there's a gosh darn dark world in here too, complete with its own fountain. Chris and Susie find a tech-filled dimension named Cyberworld with an enslaved populace that's under the tyrannical rule of a queen called, well, just Queen. Yes, not the Queen, but just Queen. She's not even human, but rather an android of sorts, and a self-described computer. Noelle, who is the most minor of minor characters in the first chapter, has found herself in this world as well, and the Queen soon captures her and intends to turn her into her own personal servant. Rousey soon joins up with you after following you, claiming he sensed a dark presence. And it's time once again to liberate another dark world from the forces of evil and rescue Noelle. So from here, you'll be traversing through Cyberworld, which is a bizarrely designed city with teacups and Ferris wheels in the background, keyboards which act as switches for laser gates, and it's chock full of bizarre enemies such as the enslaved residents who are under the Queen's command due to wires being sutured to their faces. And as per usual, the goal is to not attack your enemies, but use the act commands to win battles, just as it was in Chapter 1 and just as it began in Undertale. And as you can imagine, you'll be in for some incredible dialogue and outcomes throughout. But actually, before we go any further with the witty, fun, and classic, as always, Toby Fox style dialogue, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the returning genocide route to the game, which I have not played through yet and plan on doing a separate video on in the future. People are calling this the Snowgrave route, and plenty of Deltarune fans have already made their runs and shared them here on YouTube. But we will be talking about the canon pacifist run, as most people are sure to experience this game on their first playthrough. But anyway, back to the dialogue, which is just fantastic, and the humor is there in full force, and the Queen is a better villain than the King was in the first chapter by a country mile, and it's pretty much due to her actually being there throughout the story instead of just being revealed at the end. Although Chapter 1 had the fake villain in Lancer, Chapter 1 kind of lacked a clear and present threat, but the Queen delivers on that front tenfold, and even though she's a comical character at heart, she can clearly hurt people, wire you up, and turn you into a mindless slave, and she can pretty much accomplish anything thanks to her being a computer and being surrounded by a world that is full of tech. But I really like how she's just so sarcastic, and even though she's serious in her goals for world domination, her approach is the furthest thing from it. She even enlists the help of Birdly, who is the class nerd who the Queen sees as disposable, but he aims to please her, admiring her intelligence as a computer. I really love how the Queen realizes she made a big mistake by making him a servant because he's so annoying. She tries everything she can to avoid him. I really like Birdly and thought it was a great idea to take this other minor character and expand on him just like Noel. After a handful of failed attempts by Birdly, the Queen turns on him and soon wises up to the evils of the Queen. After explaining his past and getting more comfortable with our protagonist, realizing they have more in common than they realized, and decides to switch sides and join the good fight. But of course, Birdly has to do it in the most annoying and awkward way possible, as only he can. I really get a kick out of this guy and his goofballish nature. Come to think of it, there's plenty of goofy characters and moments in this chapter, some minor and some major. From this random as hell dog. God, that surprised the shit out of me when that happened. To this hilariously fun battle between a trio of hip-hop robots who mistake you for being the Queen's goons, but after dancing Charlie Brown's Christmas style with them, they realize that you're actually the good guys. And this was really funny, really unexpected moment that was one of the most memorable moments in the chapter for me. But speaking of characters, let's talk about one that's basically the show stealer for this chapter, and that's Spamton. And man, you want to talk about lore, fascinating lore, and learning so much about a character, but still having so many questions. Spamton is a puppet salesman who speaks in the lingo of internet advertisements, but it's mixed in with hyperlink blocks and bizarre wordings that will get you asking questions and scratching your head. Plus, after you encounter him and visit his shop, Spamton will be sure to give you the heebie-jeebies because, wow, this guy is fucked up. We see these weird, yeah, that's putting it mildly, dialogue sections in which he refers to Mike as his glasses go static and asks if anyone is out there. Like, is someone trapped inside Spamton? Is Mike in there? Like, in his body? Spamton sort of acknowledges this and kind of doesn't at the same time, and it's weird. It's just fucking weird. Who is Mike? There's this secret that Spamton is hiding, but we really can't fully understand Spamton's dialogue because of the weird style in which he speaks, and the hyperlink blocks seem to be editing his speech, and those are probably the juiciest bits of lore. And I have to say, I've never been so weirded out before and enjoyed it to this level, and be so intrigued by a character because he gets a decent amount of face time in this game, and yet he's still a total mystery. It turns out that after the first encounter, it is possible to never see him again. But if you're so inclined, you can decide to visit his store and have him send you on an errand to fetch a disc which is buried in the depths of the Queen's mansion, way down in the basement. And the approach to the disc has got to be one of the creepiest things that I have felt in a game in a while. I just said that Spamton is creepy, but this is so creepy and not even a lot of creepy stuff happens down here. But I think that's kind of the charm of it, that nothing really that creepy happens and you're expecting it. And it would be far too predictable if they did some sort of jump scare, and they don't really have that here. Well, there is one moment, and I'll get to that a little bit later on. I'll save that for the end, because it will fit in with the conclusion to this chapter. So after going through this brutal laser segment, you'll eventually find the disc. And man, this segment had me dying over and over until I realized to just look at the shadows, and you'll know where to move your teacup. But before that, damn, this is brutally hard if you don't know that simple little secret. So you'll take the disc back to Spamton, he'll download himself onto it, and then you'll be asked to take the disc back to where it was. And when you do, you'll encounter Spamton Neo, which is his new body. And this is total nightmare fuel, and a total nightmare fuel scenario where he tries to take Chris's soul with this absolutely terrifying sound. Oh man, that sound right there, I don't think I'll ever forget that. So after Susie and Rousey come to his rescue, you'll face off against Spamton Neo, and this is actually the Jevil of this chapter. Notice the mysterious connotations surrounding both characters, plus after the battle is won, after snipping all of Spamton Neo's strings, we realize that he really functions mostly as a puppet, and decides to just turn himself into a shadow crystal just like the one Jevil gave you. So there's obviously some connection there. I like the added touch of how you and the gang just walk away, and as you're about to exit into the castle, Susie is like, is anyone going to talk about what we just saw? Even Chris is unnerved by the whole ordeal, and it's just like, wow, that was a crazy experience. What a character Toby Fox constructed here. And you would just think that you'd walk away here and the characters wouldn't mention it, and we've seen that in other games. Even after the fight with Jevil, no one really talks about it again after that amongst the characters themselves. So it's really unexpected that they put this in here, and I really like that because it kind of makes these characters feel way more human. Even more so than they previously did, because they are reacting to a situation and it is the proper reaction. So they kind of shake it off and they continue through the mansion, which is so much bigger than the castle in chapter 1. You'll encounter puzzles, plenty of enemies, including Rules, who is basically a joke boss in the first chapter, but this time you'll fight him in sort of a serious battle, and it's a battle puzzle hybrid. When you finally reach the end of the mansion, you'll do battle with the Queen, who has Birdly wired up, and both will be attacking you in a fairly challenging fight. But once you get Birdly loosened up, he once again regains control of himself. Then the Queen reveals that she actually wants to use Noelle to open more fountains and create more darkness as a result. All the creatures you met along your adventure will assist you in forming into a Megazord-like robot, complete with a riff that sounds oddly familiar. Yeah, Power Rangers. So you duel it out in a punch-out style fight that is fantastically foreshadowed when you play against the Queen in an arcade game earlier on. Well, when you land the final blow, it's actually Noelle who ends up saving the day when it looks like the Queen is about to get the upper hand. But Noelle's refusal to being the Queen's peon reveals that she surprisingly cares for Noelle and only wants her to be happy. Also, Rousey wises her up to what will happen if she creates another fountain. It would actually lead to some kind of darkness-filled apocalypse. Plus, we're also told about some type of gigantic beings called Titans, which totally reminds me of Majora's Mask and, of course, Attack on Titan. which just sounds awesome. And I kind of want things to go wrong later in the story so we can see and possibly face off against these mysterious beings. Anyway, the queen ends up actually befriending you and returning to the original Dark World with Rousey and becomes Lancer's adoptive mother of sorts. And I can only imagine how hilarious things will get in future chapters with that bizarre element present. I don't know how Toby Fox does it, but somehow he made this villain who is terrorizing you so likable throughout the chapter that her face turn really doesn't seem too forced, because the queen never really seemed that evil to begin with. Well, she does try to kill you at times, and I know that kind of contradicts what I said at the beginning, but it's kind of hard to explain. Somehow, it never feels as nefariously evil like Flowey, for example, in Undertale. So, it really, Toby Fox just masterfully balances the queen's character and her actions where it doesn't really seem like a cop-out. So now you can walk around town in your own world and talk to the townsfolk like in the first chapter, and this time you could actually go into Sans' store, and from the looks of it, it seems like Sans and Torelli kind of have the hots for each other. And you'll also see that there is a little scene involving the bunker that you saw in the first chapter that's still making these weird motorized sounds, but you still can't get into it. I know that in one of the eventual chapters they'll probably let us go in here, and I'm really dying to know what's in here. People all over the internet are still talking about the fact that Gaster must be in here, and I don't know, but every single time someone makes a theory about Gaster, it just always ends up turning out to be wrong. So I kind of don't think that's what it's about, but maybe Toby Fox will finally cave in, or maybe that's what he had planned all along, but we'll just have to wait and see. So anyway, after you're ready, you can return home, and Torelli will offer Susie to come over and bake a pie with her, and Chris goes into the bathroom to wash his hands and ends up removing his soul like in the first chapter, and this time he climbs out the window. And when Susie asks where you are, Torelli actually comments on how this type of disappearing behavior is quite common. Chris climbs back in, reinserts his soul, and when he finally emerges from the bathroom, Torelli offers Susie to spend the night. So she does, and when you guys conk out after mere seconds of watching a monster movie, Chris awakens, tears out his soul again, and plunges the knife into the center of the living room floor, opening up what appears to be some sort of makeshift fountain as darkness comes pouring out of the opening. Then a creepy-ass smile appears on the TV. And this is where I'm going to talk about what I mentioned before when we went down to the basement with the whole Spamton thing. There's a smile that actually makes a blink and you'll miss it cameo down there. And this is the same smile that you see on the TV. And it's right before you flip the switch and have to go through the laser puzzle. I don't know about you guys, but I really love all this weird, creepy, elusive stuff Toby Fox puts in his games, and really makes me want to explore these universes even more. Oh, and I want to just take a minute to mention that Toby Fox has once again given us some tremendous music as well. The main Cyberworld theme is incredible, and has anyone noticed that Spamton's shop theme is a slowed down, simplified version of Jevel's theme from the first chapter? Just incredible stuff. This chapter was just fucking fantastic, and I enjoyed it more than chapter 1. It just felt more robust and interesting, and I think the Spamton stuff really elevated that, but I really just dug the whole technological environment of Cyberworld Toby Fox just went all out making this and having fun with the concept of populating his fantasy world of Deltarune with all sorts of wackiness, perplexing characters, and memorable moments. So now we've learned that Chapter 3, 4, and 5 will all drop at the same time, and the package will cost money this time around. And I have no problem with that, as I would have gladly paid for Chapter 2. And now we're going to get plenty of game to play with come the next release. I just hope it gets here sooner than later and not another 3 years, but for some reason I don't think it will take that long. Toby Fox was unable to get medical help for his chronic wrist pain most of 2020 due to the pandemic, and now that Fox can get to his doctor, I think that it's really going to work out a lot better this time around, even though there'll be 3 times the work. So who really knows? But I'm kind of just trying to be positive here. So let me know what you guys thought about this chapter down in the comments below. Do you still like Chapter 1 better, or do you agree with me and think Chapter 2 was superior? And do you think Deltarune so far looks like it's on track for being better than Undertale, or is about equal, or not as good? Well, let me know, guys. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bells to get all notifications when I post all my new videos. I want to thank my patrons for your continued support as always. And thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time.